Welcome back to the Wizard Shop, and today we're going to do another buy this, not that, diesel trucks. Let's get started. So many of you have watched very many Car Wizard videos. There's over 200 of them. You won't find very many pickup trucks. I'm not a truck guy. I don't really work on a whole lot of trucks here, but in the past I have worked on tons of trucks. Now when I mention trucks, I'm not talking about Peterbilts. I'm talking about Chevy half tons, Dodge 3/4 tons, pickup trucks. That's what I'm talking about. And I personally am not a fan of brodozers. The huge trucks where the back end's lower than the front and the guy's puffing vape pens out the side window. I don't get into that stuff. I and Mrs. Wizard are of the mind a truck is a truck. It's stock. You leave it alone. You haul horse trailers with it. You haul construction materials with it. It's not a stance mobile.
Or you haul cars with it.
Or cars, yeah. You go pick up cars and haul them home. Pick up engines, whatever. That's what they're for. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about diesel trucks. Stock. Not talking about emissions deleted or modified or tuned. We're not getting into that. It's stock as it left the factory. There's going to be 4 of these that you should not buy and 4 that you should buy if you're in the market for a diesel truck. So the ones I'll start with are 4 of the trucks you should not buy if you're in the diesel market. You should run away from them. They're going to cause you bankruptcy, marriage problems. It's going to cause you to lose your house. They're really that bad. The first one in the not to buy would be 2003 to 2007 Ford F250 or F350 with the 6-liter Power Stroke diesel. Now it's easy to say, Car Wizard, everybody knows not to buy the 6.0 or 6.0 or 6 below or whatever you guys call it. But there are a lot of people that don't know about the 6-liter. I've had customers come in here and say, I'm in the market for a diesel truck. What do you think about the 6-liter diesel? And bam, that tells me right there, this guy does not know about the 6-liter diesel. So yes, there are people out there that don't know about them. Now why not to buy these engines? Number 1 is blown head gaskets. They had numerous blown head gaskets. They used torque to yield head bolts and they would stretch and it would overheat the engine, blow the head gasket, and it's a major repair. Another issue is electrical. It's the fuel injection control module, or they also call it for short FICM, F-I-C-M. These regularly go bad and your truck will crank and will not start. And you have to send the FICM off to be rebuilt. I've heard that word so many times when I worked in the truck world. My FICM went out, my FICM was bad, I sent it off to get rebuilt. It's just a really common problem on these 6-liter diesels. Another one is the turbo fails to actuate. These are V&T turbos. There's little tiny vanes inside that can actuate to make a big turbo seem like a small turbo. And what happens is the unison ring inside gets stuck and your turbo only works under high RPM or only under low RPM and loses boost on the top end. I actually bought a truck. I had an 03 F250 with a 6-liter. I had to pull the turbo off, pull it all apart, and clean the unison ring and put it all back together, and it worked again. You're not going to get that done for $100. It's going to be very expensive. And also oil cooler failures. EGR cooler, the oil cooler, it's a liquid to liquid cooler and it goes bad. I've seen a lot of these issues. The 6-liter is a very problematic engine. It's one of the worst diesel engines you can buy. It's really that bad. Unless you got tons of money to just throw into the truck and you don't care, I would really not even buy one of those. Now I did own one and I fixed some of the issues, common things with it, and it actually ran very well. It was very powerful. But while it was running perfect and everything was in top-notch shape, I knew in the back of my mind, now is the time to sell this truck. Not when it blows the head gaskets or does something stupid. So we sold it because I didn't want to get stuck with that. I don't want you guys to get stuck with it either. So on to the next. Next one will be 1992 to 2000 Chevy 2500 or 3500 with the 6.5-liter turbo diesel. These are fairly common. There's lots of them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist for sale. They're fairly cheap. You're like, oh, $3,000 for a diesel pickup. I can swing that. I'll go ahead and buy one of those. And it'll be one of the biggest mistakes you can make because they really are not a good engine. Some of the issues they had was on the injector pump, there was actually an optical sensor that would tell the fuel to turn on or tell the engine to start. Those can get clogged and get dirty. Your engine won't start. You're stuck in the Walmart parking lot cranking, all because a little tiny optical sensor in the injector pump got dirty. It's also very common for people to try to run waste vegetable oil or black diesel or used motor oil into their truck, and they think, oh, this is cool, my fuel cost will be reduced, and then the fuel is so dark that the optical sensor can't see across to the other side. Now the truck won't start, and they're like, wonder what happened. Another one is a common one I've seen is where the two starter bolts go into the block, like a typical Chevy small block has, is that it requires so much torque to turn these motors over. Actually, the starter can twist, actually break the flange where the starter mounts and makes the block unusable. Hoovy actually bought one years and years and years ago, back when I was working out of the shop at my house. He thought, I'll get this thing fixed up, and he bought it for cheap and ended up having to dump it because the block was cracked. It was broken right where the starter bolts go in. There's a fix for it. There's a small metal tab that fits on the end of the starter and bolts to the side of the block and gives some more stability. Those can come loose, or the starter's been replaced and that part was not put back on, the small little tab, and you end up breaking the block. It's really bad. When that happens, it's time for a new block. Another common problem they have is cracked heads, and also the main webs on the block where the main caps are can be cracked. Had some block issues, and when those go bad, and if it really goes bad, it can break the crankshaft and it's time for a new engine. And lastly, the little control module, or it's called a PMD, pump mounted driver, is mounted on the injector pump itself, and it gets excessively hot and vibration and they fail, and then your truck won't start. You can relocate these away from the injector pump and it solves the problem, but many people that I've known that have the 6.5 have said, I won't buy another one again. It's really, there's always something broke. I'm always getting caught off guard and my truck won't start, and it really gets annoying. Finally they sell it and I don't see that truck again. So don't get one of those. The next one not to buy is 2008 to 2010 Ford F-250 350 6.4 liter Power Stroke diesel. When these came out, it was supposed to be an upgrade or an update to the 6-liter Power Stroke. And you thought, okay, we got these problems solved, we have a much better engine, and it ended up being just as bad. It actually backfired. It was really, really, really bad. They had decent power. They had a little bit more power than the 6 liters, but the fuel economy, I've heard from some people, was half of what the 6-liter was. And no matter what they did, people would get tunes, they would do this, they would do that, and the fuel economy was really, really bad all the time. There wasn't much they could do about it. These are getting into the years, starting in 08 and 09 on any pickup truck, is when emission systems start to get insane. They start choking the engine out. And if any of these things, the sensors all along the exhaust system, whether it be temperature sensors or DPF sensors or anything along this line, it sends your truck into reduced power mode. And if you're towing a load, you're making money with your truck, and now you're in reduced power mode, and it's going to be some $1,000 sensor, and you're broke down on the side of the road. I've heard this story so many times. I get a phone call, hey, I'm halfway to Nebraska, and I'm into this reduced power mode, and blah, 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 and what do I do? And all because emission system. There's actually nothing wrong with the engine. The engine is fine. It's that something went wrong in the emission system, and the way that they force you to fix it is they rob your power from your engine through the computer, and they say, now you're going to fix this problem. A lot of people delete their emission systems and go without them, which is highly illegal, but I'm not going to recommend to do that because it's illegal. They also have DPF and EGR issues really bad. It's a nightmare on the 6.4. And they also have fuel contamination getting into the engine oil past the rings. It's a very common issue. Your oil starts to get diluted with fuel. It's very dangerous to the engine. Many of these diesel engines that I'm recommending not to buy, especially when they get into 2008 and newer range, most of them require the cab to come off to get to do major work, to pull the heads or to do major work on the engine. It's actually faster and more efficient to pull the whole cab off in the air, just like in this picture. I know a couple guys north of here. There's a diesel control and there's also diesel pickup specialists. You can walk into their shop and at any given time there's 2 or 3 trucks with the cabs off and in the air, and it's just like, oh my God. And that's common for those pickup trucks. That is really an annoyance. If something goes wrong with your truck and you're like, okay, now I'm going to have the whole cab lifted off my truck. This is not going to be cheap. No, it's not going to be cheap. And the last one not to buy is 1988 to 1994 Ford F-250 or 350 with the 7.3 IDI, which means indirect injection. Now the 6.9 was a very good engine, and we'll talk about that one in a minute, but the 7.3 is known for one of the major issues is cavitation of the cylinders. If you don't keep up on the antifreeze, you don't keep up on the additives and the antifreeze especially, the cylinder walls are thin enough on these engines that it can start to rust and pit and get pinholes through the cooling jacket into the cylinders. You start to get coolant in there or combustion gases into the cooling system. And when that happens, it's time for a new block. When these engines were new, they didn't have that problem. But as they get older, it's becoming common, more and more common. And these trucks, when they get to be something wrong of that nature, they're usually abandoned. They're just like, I'm done with this truck. I'm not going to mess with it. The 6.9 and the 7.3 both share this problem. They do not like cold starts. If your glow plugs and your batteries and everything isn't in tip-top shape and the temperature drops below 50, down into 40s and 30s, you're not going to start one of those. Crazy D in the office, when his days doing salvage work, he had a couple or 3 of those trucks, and he said, my Cummins always started, my old Chevy Diesels always started, but when it got below 50, I could just forget about my Fords. I knew when I woke up in the morning, we're not taking those trucks because I already know they're not going to start. And they never did. If you have everything in order, your glow plugs, they do okay. Or if you plug it in, the block warmer, they do okay. But they are not tolerant of cold temperatures at all. The 7.3s don't have much more power than the 6.9s. And as they get older, they can also start to develop oil usage. The rings get worn. They actually can use a couple or 3 quarts between oil changes. When you've got 10 or more, 12 quarts, it's not that big of a deal, but still, that's a lot of oil being burned. And that's just something to keep in mind, but I really would recommend not to buy the 7.3 IDIs of those years. Now, before we move on to the to-buy diesel pickup trucks, it's amazing what it costs and also the amount of money that people put into these trucks. One guy was actually in the shop that I was working at before. He came in and I guess he was kind of bragging. He knew that I worked on European cars and was starting to get into working on exotics. He says, yeah, I got this Duramax and my lift kit, I've got $9 grand into that. My wheels are $700 a piece. My tires are almost $1,000 a piece. I went through and had a tune. I had all the emissions deleted. I've got 12 grand into that, and I bought the truck for $68,000. I was like, what? You almost have 100 grand into this truck. He goes, yeah, it sure is nice. I said, man, for $100,000, you can go buy a Lamborghini Gallardo, and you'll be 10 times cooler than this truck. I said, I've heard you mention that you'd like to have a Ferrari someday, but you can't afford it. And then you go and spend $100,000 on a truck. And he looked me right in the eye, F you. I was like, F me? I didn't spend that money and waste that money on a truck. I would never put $100,000 into a Chevy pickup truck. No way. I don't get into that. I know a lot of people do that, and if that's your thing, that's cool, but it's not my thing. But if you have that much money into your truck, don't come to me talking about how you can't afford a Ferrari. Yes, you can. The next thing is the cost of repairs, especially when you get into the 2008 and newer diesel pickup trucks. I kind of know the owners of the pickup shops I talked about a little bit ago, the diesel pickup shops, and both of them have both told me a truck rarely leaves their shop ever for less than $5,000. It's usually upwards of 10 or more. So if you're in the market for a newer diesel pickup truck, just know if something majorly goes wrong with the emission systems or the injection system, it's not going to be $1,500. It could very likely be $15,000. They're not cheap to fix. My old mentor that taught me a lot of the wizard tips that I have, he told me, he said, unless you are earning money with your truck, hauling freight, you should not buy a modern diesel pickup truck, because the cost to keep them running is cost prohibitive. It doesn't make sense. Now, if you're hauling a camper, a heavy camper, or you're hauling a heavy load frequently, weekly, they do make sense. You're earning money, and when you can make that money, you can pay for the repairs. But if you're using it to go around town and take the kids to soccer practice, you might want to stick to a gas engine, because you can be in a world of hurt if something major goes wrong on one of these. I got one more story to tell you before we move on to the 2x trucks. It's not a fault of the truck, but the story I have is a customer was a farmer. They had a 2008 F-250 with a 6.4 diesel, and the truck ran fine. It was not a big problem. But on his yard at his farm, he had a giant diesel fuel station, like a big container, and he could pull up his tractors, he could pull up his truck or whatever and fill it up with diesel there on his yard. And somehow it got condensation and water in it. And he filled his truck up, and it was like 25 or 30% water, just plain water into his fuel tank. It completely wiped out the injectors, the high pressure pump. It just wrecked the entire injection system. One small mistake. He took it to one of the reputable diesel shops here north of Newton. $9,900, almost 10 grand. Putting water into his gas tank accidentally was $10,000 out of his pocket. When I heard that, I kind of started thinking, you know what? I don't think I need a diesel. It's just, wow, $10,000. They're crazy. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're looking to buy one. Now we're going to talk about some trucks that you should buy if you're in the diesel market. The first one to buy is 2006 or 2007 Chevy 2500 or 3500 with a Duramax, specifically the LBZ Duramax. The previous years of Duramax were good engines. They just had a lot of injector failures. They would drop out pretty regularly. They actually kind of fixed that in the 06 to 07 model, and that was taken care of. These are some of the last years that you can buy a Duramax before, like the aforementioned 2008 and newer trucks where they choke them to death with emissions. 06 and 07 really doesn't have a whole lot of that going on, maybe a little bit, but it's enough to where it's livable. You can deal with it. These have very good power, very good fuel economy, and they're fairly easy to work on. They're not too bad. Your starter, your alternator, things like that go out. It's not really that big of a deal. But you are starting to get into the cab off to fix major problems. But these would be one of the Duramaxes I would really recommend. The next one I recommend to buy is 1989 to 1998 Dodge 2500 or 3500, or it also could be 250, 350, which is basically the 12-valve Cummins. Now these aren't known for super high horsepower figures. They can be tuned for high horsepower, but these engines are stupid simple. They are just so easy to work on. The parts aren't super expensive. It's as basic as you can get, almost as basic as a farm tractor diesel from the old days. It's just an ejector pump, injectors, an alternator. It's just really not much to it as far as electronics. There's not a bunch of modules, controls, and computers, and it's really, really nice to work on these engines. And like I mentioned, you can put on bigger turbos, you can change the injector pump, change some things around. You can get a lot of power and really good fuel economy. There's a lot of guys that have these old 12 valves and the truck is starting to get beat up and everything, but they're like, it still keeps running. I just want to keep holding on to this thing. Crazy D actually has a 91 or 92 Dodge Ram with the 12 valve in it. The truck is destroyed. The front end's out of it. The transmission doesn't even go into gear anymore. It's sitting in a field. It's been sitting there for 7 years. They just jokingly went out one day and threw a battery in it, and the 12 valve fired right up, and it just idled perfect. And It was saying to him, I'm ready to get back to work, even though it's not possible because the truck is destroyed by now, but the engines are that good. The next one I recommend to buy is 94 to 2003 Ford F-250 or 350 with the 7.3 liter Power Stroke. These engines are really pretty good. They can be complicated to work on. They have high pressure oil system and things of that nature to operate the injectors. They can be a little complicated, but this is before all the emissions garbage, and the parts aren't all that expensive. They have good power, decent fuel economy. They're used in ambulances, they're used in farm trucks. These engines are everywhere. There's lots of them on the road with over 400,000 miles on them. They really are a good engine. These also can be tuned for more power. You don't have to do a whole lot, and you can get quite a bit more power out of them, and they really haul a load really, really well. If it's been maintained and been taken care of, a 7.3 Power Stroke is nothing to run away from. They really are a good engine. And the last one is 1983 to 1987 Ford F-250 350 with the 6.9 liter IDI. This is the little bit smaller version as far as displacement is concerned of the 7.3. They do have the inherent cold start problems, but other than that, these engines are bulletproof. They are stupid simple, just like a 12-valve Cummins. There's no computers, there's no modules, there's no emissions, there's nothing but a good running diesel engine. They don't have tons of power, but if you need a good engine to do grunt work around a farm, to haul hay bales or whatever, and you don't need to get anywhere really fast, these engines really are bulletproof. If they've been maintained and it's got 300,000 miles on it, I wouldn't even think twice about buying a 6.9 IDI. They really are a good engine. The parts are cheap to buy. They're very easy to work on. You can fix most everything in your garage to keep it running. Like I mentioned, they do have the cold start problem. It's not a problem if you keep up on your glow plugs. All 8 of them are in good shape. The wiring harness is in good shape, a good set of batteries, and your glow plug controller, which a lot of people bypass, is still working. You can bypass it with just an on-off switch. But other than that, these are really good engines.
Okay, Car Wizard. Those are getting pretty old, though.
They are pretty old, but they're still sought after for somebody who just needs a pickup truck. It's a little bit more durable, a little bit more heavy duty, that's somewhat decent on fuel. They want a diesel, but they don't want to spend 50 grand on a diesel. These are really in the range of a cheap diesel. You can pick up one of these trucks for 2 or 3 grand that still runs great. Most diesels, especially these older ones I'm talking about, it's not unheard of to hit 500,000 miles. They last a long, long time. You might have to go through a set of injectors or an injector pump or something during that time frame, but the core engine can last a very long time. They're built very heavy duty, and they're made to be lugged and worked hard. That's what they're made for. So we're nearing the end of 2020, and a lot of us are really happy about that. We're ready to see 2020 go away. We're ready for 2021. You guys have been really supportive. The channel is growing really well, and I'm really thankful for that. Really thankful to you guys for that. I've got many years of knowledge, things I've seen in the shop, crazy stories, good wizard tips to pass along to you guys. Again, I want to thank you guys for your support. Here's to more wizard videos in 2021. If you're curious what kind of tools we use in the shop, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button already, I really recommend you do that now. We've got boat videos to come, we've got Malibu V12 videos, and we got many other cool cars in the shop. Many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.